Mr. Sterling's face, a carefully constructed mask of legal gravitas, began to crumble. It didn't shatter all at once. It was more like watching a fine porcelain plate develop a spiderweb of cracks under immense, invisible pressure. His mouth opened, then closed, forming the shape of an objection he knew he couldn't voice. Across the mahogany table, my husband, soon-to-be ex-husband Mark, simply stared. His arrogance, the solid bedrock upon which he'd built his entire life, was eroding into sand before my very eyes. He looked at his lawyer, then at me, then back at his lawyer, a frantic, silent plea for an explanation that would not come. For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a genuine smile touched my lips. It wasn't a large smile. It was a small, quiet, private thing, a secret I was keeping with myself. It was the smile of a chess player who had just said, "Checkmate," when her opponent didn't even realize the game was ending. They thought they were still in the opening moves, sacrificing pawns. They had no idea their king had been cornered an hour ago, but I'm getting ahead of myself. That moment of beautiful, silent implosion was the culmination of a year of quiet suffering and meticulous planning. To understand the profound satisfaction of that silence in the conference room, you have to understand the noise that came before it. You have to understand the man I was married to for 15 years. I am sitting now on the porch of a small house that is entirely my own. It overlooks a calm, quiet lake, the kind of place Mark would have called provincial and boring. A gentle breeze is rustling the leaves of the old oak tree in my yard. On the wall of my study, hanging in a simple black frame, is the final invoice from my lawyer, paid in full. It's my favorite piece of art. It's a receipt for my freedom. Today marks the second anniversary of the day the divorce was finalized, the day my old life officially ended and this new one began. And that memory, the look on their faces, feels as fresh and satisfying as it did in that very moment. So let me start from the beginning. Mark and I met in college. He was magnetic, ambitious, the kind of man who filled every room he entered. I was quiet, studious, the kind of person who preferred the library to a party. They say opposites attract, and for a while we did. I was drawn to his confidence, and he, I think, was drawn to my calm. He saw me as a sanctuary, a steady harbor where he could anchor his chaotic ambitions. I saw him as a thrilling adventure. We married a year after graduation. He had a dream of starting his own high-end construction firm. I had a degree in business administration and a knack for numbers. While he was out charming clients and schmoozing investors, I was in our small spare bedroom, setting up the books, managing payroll, filing the taxes. I built the financial scaffolding that allowed his dreams to have a foundation. For 15 years, that was our dynamic. He was the face of the company, the rainmaker. I was the silent, invisible partner. I raised our 2 children, managed our home with quiet efficiency, and kept the business finances humming along in the background. I was the company's and the family's chief operating officer, but my title was just wife. And it was a role I played without complaint because I loved him. Or, more accurately, I loved the man I thought he was. Everyone in our social circle saw me as Mark's quiet, pleasant, and slightly overwhelmed wife, the one who was lucky to have snagged such a charismatic and successful man. His mother, Eleanor, certainly saw me that way. She treated me with a kind of condescending pity, as if I were a stray kitten Mark had charitably brought in from the cold. She never missed an opportunity to remind me how brilliant her son was, how his success was a force of nature, and how my job was simply to not get in his way. I was, by all external measures, the stereotypical supportive spouse, unassuming, agreeable. I smoothed over his sharp edges, made excuses for his absences at school plays, and hosted flawless dinner parties where he could hold court. I was the stage manager for the grand performance of his life, and he and everyone else mistook my quiet competence for simplicity, my patience for passivity, my loyalty for a lack of backbone. That was their first and most critical mistake. The end came not with a bang, but with the crisp, cold sound of a manila folder being dropped on a kitchen island. It was a Tuesday. I remember that specifically because I had just finished making his favorite meal, a beef bourguignon that took 6 hours to prepare. The rich aroma filled the house, a scent I had always associated with comfort and home. Mark walked in, not with his usual boisterous greeting, but with a chillingly calm demeanor. He didn't kiss me. He didn't even look at me. He just placed the folder on the granite countertop that I had picked out in the kitchen I had designed. "I want a divorce, Sarah," he said. His voice was flat, devoid of any emotion. It was the same tone he used when telling a subcontractor their work wasn't up to par. It was a business transaction. I stared at him, the wooden spoon still in my hand. For a moment, I thought it was a joke, a truly terrible one. But his eyes were like polished stones, hard and empty. There was no love there, no sadness, not even anger, just a cold, final resolve. "What?" I managed to whisper. The word felt foreign in my mouth. "I've had my lawyer draw up the paperwork," he continued, gesturing to the folder. "It's all in there. I think you'll find the terms are fair, considering the circumstances." My hands were shaking. I opened the folder. Inside were dozens of pages of dense legalese, but the summary on the first page was brutally clear. He was claiming the business, Markham Fine Homes, was on the verge of bankruptcy. He claimed our beautiful home was mortgaged to the hilt, with several loans against it that I had apparently never known about. He was offering me a one-time payment of $50,000 and a year of minimal alimony. I was to be out of the house in 30 days. I looked up from the papers, my heart pounding a frantic, painful rhythm against my ribs. "Mark, this isn't possible. The business is thriving. We just had our best year ever, and the house, we paid off the mortgage 5 years ago." He gave a short, humorless laugh. "You don't understand business, Sarah. You never did. You see the checks coming in. You don't see the overhead, the debt, the liabilities. It's a house of cards. I've been keeping it afloat for your sake, but I can't do it anymore." It was the lie that broke me. Not the affair I instantly knew he was having, not the cruelty of his delivery, but the sheer, breathtaking audacity of the lie. He stood there. In the kitchen I ran. In the house my careful budgeting had secured, and told me I didn't understand the very finances I had personally managed for a decade and a half. He was erasing my contribution, my very existence, with a few casual, dismissive sentences. In that moment, the shock and the pain didn't curdle into tears. They froze. They solidified into something cold, hard, and sharp. It was a feeling I had never experienced before, pure, unadulterated rage. But my face, I'm sure, just showed devastation. That was the face he expected to see. He saw my silence as acquiescence, my shock as weakness. "Look," he said, his tone softening into a disgusting, patronizing imitation of kindness. "I know this is hard, but it's for the best. We've grown apart. I'll make sure you land on your feet. $50,000 is more than enough for a deposit on a small apartment." He thought he was negotiating my surrender. He had no idea he had just handed me a declaration of war. I didn't say another word. I just nodded, letting a single tear roll down my cheek for effect. He took that as his victory, gave a curt nod, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving the folder, his weapon, on the counter next to the simmering stew. The smell of it suddenly made me sick. That night, after he'd packed a bag and left for what I knew was his new life, I didn't cry. I sat at the kitchen island until 3 a.m, the legal documents spread out before me, and I thought. I thought about every late night I'd spent reconciling accounts, every tax loophole I had found and he had exploited, every single dollar that had flowed through that business, and I remembered my secret. You see, Mark had 2 sets of books. There was the official set, the one his fancy downtown accountant saw, the one prepared for the IRS. It showed a modest, struggling business, constantly battling debt and thin margins. Then there was the real set, the one I managed. It was a collection of spreadsheets stored on an encrypted hard drive that I kept in a fireproof safe, disguised as a book on my shelf. A book titled Great Expectations. The irony was not lost on me. This second set of books detailed everything. The shell corporation in the Cayman Islands where he siphoned off profits, the consulting fees paid to a non-existent company that was just another of his bank accounts, the 2 investment properties in another state bought under a holding company's name. I knew where every single penny he thought he had hidden was buried. He had taught me how to do it years ago, bragging about how clever he was. He had shown me his system for tax efficiency, never once imagining that the diligent student would one day use the lesson against the teacher. He saw me as his bookkeeper, his clerk. He never saw me as his equal. He thought that because I didn't have the fancy degree or the slick talk, I didn't truly understand the complex financial web he was weaving. He underestimated me. He assumed I was just inputting data, not analyzing it, not memorizing it, not saving it. And there was another secret, a smaller one, but no less important. My grandmother had left me a modest inheritance a few years prior. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Mark had known about it, of course, and had immediately started talking about investing it in the business. I had smiled and said I'd think about it. Instead, I had quietly moved the money into a trust under my maiden name, an account he had no knowledge of and no access to. It was my just-in-case fund. I never thought I'd have to use it against him. Now it was going to be my war chest. The decision was made in the cold pre-dawn light of my perfect, beautiful kitchen. I would not confront him. I would not scream or rage or show him my hand. That would only make him more careful, make him move the money to places even I couldn't find. No. The only way to win was to let him believe his own lie. The lie that I was weak, naive, and incompetent. I would have to play the part of the broken wife. My first call was not to a lawyer. It was to my grandmother. She had been a clerk for a federal judge for 40 years and possessed a mind like a steel trap and a spine to match. I told her everything, my voice calm and steady. She listened without interruption. When I was finished, there was a long pause. Then she said, her voice firm, "Good girl, you did not cry. You made a plan. Now here is what you do. You will not use the lawyer your friend recommended. You will not use a local family lawyer. Mark will have the best shark he can afford, and that shark will eat a guppy alive. I have a name for you. Her name is Anya Sharma. She specializes in forensic divorce cases. She is expensive. She is brilliant, and she is utterly ruthless. Use the money I gave you. That is what it was for. And one more thing, Sarah," she added, her voice dropping slightly. "From this moment on, document everything. Every conversation, every email, every threat, veiled or otherwise. Buy a recorder. Keep a journal. Become a court reporter for your own life. An arrogant man's greatest weakness is his own voice. He loves the sound of it so much he forgets what he is saying." Her words were a balm and a battle plan all in one. I felt the last vestiges of fear and panic recede, replaced by a cold, clear sense of purpose. The next day, I made 2 purchases. The first was a state-of-the-art digital voice recorder, no bigger than a pen. The second was a consultation with Anya Sharma. Anya's office was not what I expected. It was minimalist, modern, and overlooked the entire city. She was a woman in her late 40s, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, with eyes that seemed to see right through you. I told her my story, and for the first time, I laid out the whole truth. The 2 sets of books, the offshore accounts, the whole sordid mess. I expected her to be shocked. She wasn't. She just nodded, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she leaned forward, a predatory stillness about her. "He thinks you're a fool," she said. It wasn't a question. He has built his entire strategy around the assumption of your incompetence. "Yes," I said. "Good," she replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. "That is a tactical advantage we will not relinquish. From now on, in every meeting, in every phone call, you are exactly who he thinks you are. You are heartbroken. You are confused by the numbers. You are overwhelmed. We will let him and his lawyer lead us. We will let them get comfortable. We will let them put their lies and their arrogance on the record, and you will record every single word of it. She explained the law in our state. One-party consent. As long as I was a party to the conversation, the recording was perfectly legal and admissible. They will never see it coming, she promised. Men like your husband write their own indictments every time they open their mouths. And so the play began. I hired a cheap, ineffective local lawyer for show, a man named Mr. Blevins who was semi-retired and more interested in his golf game than my case. It was a piece of strategic brilliance suggested by Anya. Mark and his lawyer, a smug pinstriped barracuda named Arthur Sterling, would see Blevins and relax. They'd see him as a pushover, which he was. They wouldn't dig into my background or my resources because they would assume my choice of counsel reflected my own lack of sophistication. The first mediation meeting was a masterclass in humiliation. It was held in Sterling's opulent office, all dark wood and leather-bound books that looked like they had never been opened. Mark and Sterling sat on one side of the vast table, radiating confidence. I sat on the other with poor Mr. Blevins, who smelled faintly of mothballs. Mark started by expressing his deep disappointment and sadness at our situation. He spoke in platitudes about growing apart, about wanting the best for me. It was a performance for the lawyers, and it was sickening. Then Sterling took over, his voice a smooth, condescending purr. He laid out their generous offer again, this time with complicated charts and binders full of documents that were meant to intimidate and confuse. He talked about market downturns, leveraged assets, and unfunded liabilities. It was a blizzard of financial jargon designed to bury the truth. "As you can see, Sarah," Sterling said, pointing to a particularly alarming-looking graph that showed a steep nosedive, "Markham Fine Homes is carrying a significant debt load. Mark has been working tirelessly to keep it from going under. Frankly, liquidating now would leave both of you with almost nothing. His offer to you is coming from his personal post-separation earnings, a gesture of his continued goodwill." I looked at the graph. It was a complete fabrication. The data points were cherry-picked, the timeline compressed to show a false trend. The real spreadsheets on my hidden hard drive showed a steady, steep climb in profits over the last 5 years. I did what Anya told me to do. I let my eyes well up with tears. I clutched a tissue in my hand. I don't understand," I stammered, my voice trembling. I thought we were doing so well." Mark sighed dramatically, a man burdened by his wife's ignorance. "Sarah, please. I handled the business. You handled the house. Let's not pretend you understand corporate finance. This is the reality. I'm trying to protect you from the worst of it." The pen in my pocket, my silent little witness, was recording everything. The condescension in Mark's voice, the smug legal jargon from Sterling, my own pathetic, broken-sounding replies. It was a perfect performance. Sterling and Mark exchanged a look of triumph. They had me. The poor, stupid little wife was going to roll over and accept the crumbs they were offering. "Perhaps," Sterling suggested smoothly, "you should take some time to review these documents with your counsel. We are confident you'll see that our offer is more than fair." The meetings continued like this for months. Each one was a new layer of psychological torment. Mark brought his mother, Eleanor, to one session. She sat there, dripping in jewelry, and talked about how relieved she was that Mark was finally free to live his own life. She told a story about how I had once ruined a dinner party by undercooking a roast, presenting it as evidence of my general incompetence. "She was never suited to be the wife of a man like Mark," she said to Sterling, as if I weren't even in the room. "She has no ambition, no drive. It was like he was tethered to a rowboat while trying to captain a yacht." I just sat there and took it. I let the tears fall. Inside, I was a block of ice. I imagined my grandmother's voice. Become a court reporter for your own life. So I did. I noted the date, the time, the attendees, and the exact phrasing of every insult, every lie, every single piece of their self-incriminating monologue. They escalated their cruelty, confident that I was defeated. Mark paraded his new girlfriend, a woman half my age named Tiffany, at all our old haunts. Friends would call me, their voices dripping with pity, to report sightings of Mark and Tiffany at our favorite restaurant, or at the country club where we had been members for a decade. He was actively trying to humiliate me, to rub my nose in his new, shiny life, while I was supposedly destitute. He would call me to discuss the logistics of the divorce, but the calls were always just opportunities for him to boast. He talked about the new condo he was buying, the trip to Paris he was planning with Tiffany, the expansion of the business he was considering once all this unpleasantness is over. "I'm really turning a corner, Sarah," he'd say, his voice full of false sincerity. The stress of our marriage was really holding the business back. It's amazing what's possible with a positive partner. And I would play my part. "Oh, Mark," I'd sigh into the phone, my recorder app running silently in the background. "That's wonderful. I'm worried about how I'm going to pay my rent." The feigned concern in his voice was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Don't you worry. I'll take care of you. Just sign the papers and we can all move on. It's the best thing for everyone." Every night I would retreat to my small rented apartment, a place I had deliberately chosen for its drab and depressing atmosphere, in case he ever sent someone to check on me. And I would work. I would transcribe the day's recordings, highlighting the most damning phrases. I'd cross-reference their lies with the real financial data from my secret hard drive. I compiled spreadsheets, created timelines, and built a fortress of evidence, brick by painstaking brick. I worked with Anya and her forensic accountant, a quiet, brilliant man named David Chen. We met in secret in coffee shops in neighboring towns. I'd hand over thumb drives filled with my work. David would take my raw data and weave it into irrefutable legal and financial reports. He uncovered things even I had missed. Assets hidden behind assets, a complex web of deceit that was as intricate as it was illegal. Anya was my general. She guided my performance, counseling me on what questions to ask in meetings, what weaknesses to feign. "This week, be confused about the capital gains tax," she'd instruct. "Next week, seem worried about your credit score." Each feigned vulnerability was a carefully crafted lure, designed to draw out more of their arrogance, more of their lies. The hardest part was the loneliness. I couldn't tell my friends what I was doing. They saw me as a victim, a woman spiraling into depression. They brought me casseroles and offered well-meaning but useless advice. I had to endure their pity, which was almost as bad as Mark's cruelty. Only my grandmother and Anya's team knew the truth. I was not a victim. I was a hunter, patiently stalking my prey. The 6 months I spent playing the part of the broken woman were the longest of my life. I had to watch the man I had spent 15 years with systematically try to destroy me, not just financially, but emotionally. He wasn't just divorcing me, he was trying to erase me, to rewrite our history so that he was the hero and I was a footnote. A mistake he had finally corrected. But with every lie, every insult, my resolve hardened. The pain was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but it was being slowly replaced by a sense of righteous purpose. He had started this fire, but I was going to be the one who controlled the inferno. He thought he was demolishing a shack. He had no idea he was taking a sledgehammer to a munitions factory. Finally, the day came. Anya decided we had enough. We had recordings of Mark and Sterling openly discussing the strategy of hiding assets. We had recordings of Mark admitting the business was having its best decade ever in a moment of boastfulness. We had a complete documented map of every dollar he had tried to make disappear. Anya scheduled the final mediation. Her email to Sterling was a work of art. She wrote that her client, Sarah, was exhausted by the process and ready to accept the reality of her situation. She suggested one last meeting to sign the papers and avoid the unnecessary expense and emotional toll of a trial. Sterling's reply was almost instantaneous. He was delighted. They agreed to meet at a neutral location, a mediation center with a series of bland, soulless conference rooms. The morning of the meeting, I felt a strange calm. The anger and the grief had burned away, leaving behind a placid certainty. I chose my outfit with care, not a power suit, but a simple, slightly worn-looking beige dress. I wanted to look like a woman who had already surrendered. We arrived first. My team was small but formidable. Me, Anya Sharma, and David Chen, the forensic accountant. We sat on one side of the long, polished table. Anya laid out 3 simple folders in front of her. David had his laptop. I had nothing but my purse, which contained the small digital recorder, capturing this final act for posterity. Mark, Eleanor, and Arthur Sterling swept in 10 minutes later. They were a vision of victory. Mark was wearing a new, impeccably tailored suit. Eleanor was in a bright red dress, a triumphant splash of color in the beige room. Sterling looked like a cat that had just swallowed a whole flock of canaries. They sat down, the air thick with their smug satisfaction. "Well," Sterling began, clasping his hands together, "I'm glad we could all come together to finally put this matter to rest. Mark, as always, wishes to be generous. We have the final settlement agreement here." He slid a thick document across the table. Anya didn't even look at it. She let it sit there, untouched. She smiled, a calm, almost beatific smile. "Thank you, Arthur, but we won't be needing that. We have a counter-proposal." Sterling's eyebrows shot up. "A counter-proposal? Anya, I was under the impression your client was ready to be reasonable." "Oh, she is being perfectly reasonable," Anya said, her voice still light and pleasant. "But first, I'd like to read something. A transcript, you might say." She opened the first folder. Mark and Sterling exchanged a confused look. Eleanor shifted in her seat, her triumphant expression faltering slightly. Anya began to read. Her voice was clear and steady, filling the silent room. Date, October 12th. Location, A. Sterling and Associates Conference Room. Attendees, Mark Markham, Arthur Sterling. Sterling speaking. "The key is to overwhelm her with paperwork. We bury her in financial disclosures that are technically accurate but misleading. We paint a picture of a failing business. She won't have the sophistication to question it. She'll be scared, she'll be emotional, and she'll take the first offer we give her just to make it stop." The color drained from Sterling's face. He looked as if he'd been punched in the gut. He shot a panicked glance at Mark, whose jaw had gone slack. Anya continued, her voice never wavering. "Mark Markham speaking. She really is that clueless, isn't she? I've been handling the money for years. She wouldn't know a stock from a sock. She'll probably believe whatever I tell her." "This is outrageous," Sterling sputtered, finding his voice. "Where did you get this? This is an illegal recording. It's inadmissible." He started to rise from his chair. "Please sit down, Arthur," Anya said calmly. "As I'm sure you'll recall from your bar exam, this state operates under one-party consent. My client was a party to every conversation she has recorded. It is all perfectly legal and very, very admissible." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle in the room. Then she reached into her briefcase and pulled out a small speaker. "Perhaps you'd prefer to hear it for yourselves." She pressed a button, and Mark's voice, full of arrogant laughter, filled the conference room. "Wouldn't know a stock from a sock." The audio quality was crystal clear, undeniable. Eleanor let out a small, strangled gasp. Mark looked like he was going to be physically ill. He stared at me, his eyes wide with a dawning horror. For the first time, he wasn't looking at the mousy, heartbroken wife. He was looking at a complete stranger, a stranger who had been playing him for months. Anya turned off the speaker. "We have over 80 hours of recordings, gentlemen," she said. her voice now as cold and sharp as surgical steel. "Recordings of you discussing how to hide assets in offshore accounts. Recordings of you planning to commit perjury in a deposition. Recordings of you conspiring to defraud my client. Recordings that I am sure the State Bar Association and the District Attorney's Office would find fascinating." She gestured to David Chen. "And this is David. He's a forensic accountant. He has taken the liberty of analyzing the real books, the ones my client has meticulously maintained for the last 10 years. David opened his laptop and turned it to face them. On the screen was a detailed flowchart, a beautiful, terrifying map of Mark's financial empire. It showed the main business, Markham Fine Homes, and branching off from it were lines leading to boxes labeled Cayman Holdings, LLC, Azure Properties, Inc., and 3 other shell corporations they thought were untraceable. It showed the flow of money, millions of dollars siphoned off and hidden away. "According to our analysis," David said, his voice quiet but firm, "the marital assets are not, as you claim, valued at approximately $1 million. They are valued at just over $14.7 million. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a world ending. Mark's world. Anya opened the second folder. "This is our proposal," she said, sliding a single sheet of paper across the table. "My client will take 65% of all documented assets, including the full value of the offshore accounts and the properties held in corporate names. The additional 15% above the standard 50 is for punitive damages relating to the conspiracy to commit fraud." She continued, her eyes locked on Sterling. "She will also take the house, free and clear. Mark will be responsible for all marital debt, both declared and undeclared, and of course, he will be paying 100% of our legal and accounting fees. The total for that is on the second page." Sterling's hands were shaking as he picked up the paper. His face went white as a ghost when he saw the number. "You have 2 options," Anya said, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. "Option 1, your client signs this agreement, right here, right now. All assets will be transferred within 7 days. You will walk out of this room with your law license intact, though I imagine your malpractice insurance premiums are about to go up." She leaned forward. "Option 2, you refuse. We walk out of this room. David and I go directly to the IRS with our findings. I go to the district attorney with my recordings. Your client will face multiple felony charges for tax evasion and fraud, and you, Mr. Sterling, will face disbarment and criminal charges for conspiracy and suborning perjury. Choose wisely." Sterling stared at the paper, then at his client. Mark was just a shell. The bravado, the confidence, it had all evaporated. He looked small and pathetic, a deflated balloon of a man. Eleanor was whispering frantically in his ear, but he didn't seem to hear her. "He won't sign this," Eleanor spat, her voice shrill. "This is extortion." Anya didn't even look at her. She kept her gaze fixed on Sterling. "The clock is ticking, Arthur." Sterling looked at Mark, his expression a mixture of terror and fury. He knew his career was on the line. He had been caught red-handed, advising his client to commit a crime. He had no choice. He snatched a pen from the holder on the table and shoved it into Mark's hand. "Sign it," he hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. "Sign the damn paper, you fool." Mark's hand trembled as he took the pen. He looked at me one last time, his eyes pleading. He was looking for a flicker of the old Sarah, the soft, forgiving wife who would make it all better. He found nothing. My face was a calm, placid lake, and he was drowning in it. He signed the paper. His signature, usually a bold, arrogant scrawl, was a weak, shaky line. Anya took the document, reviewed it, and placed it neatly in her briefcase. "A pleasure doing business with you," she said. Then we stood up and walked out of the room, leaving the wreckage of their lives behind us. The aftermath was as swift and brutal as Anya had predicted. The transfer of funds nearly bankrupted Mark overnight. He had to sell the business for a fraction of its worth to a competitor just to cover the settlement. The house, My beautiful house was signed over to me. I sold it a week later. I didn't want to live with the ghosts of that life. The anonymous tip to the IRS, which Anya's team delivered with surgical precision, triggered an audit that was the stuff of nightmares. They uncovered years of fraud. The penalties and back taxes were astronomical. Mark was forced into bankruptcy. Eleanor was not spared. It turned out she had been a silent partner in one of his shell corporations, and she had co-signed on several of the fraudulent loans he'd used to expand his business. When his empire collapsed, the banks came for her. She lost her sprawling retirement home and most of her savings. Last I heard, she was living in a small, rented condo, a bitter and impoverished old woman. Tiffany, the young girlfriend, vanished the moment the money did. Her loyalty, it turned out, was directly proportional to his net worth. Their social circle, the one that had pitied me and admired him, abandoned them instantly. Scandal, especially financial scandal, was a disease they didn't want to catch. The story, in a twisted version, got out. The narrative became that the brilliant Mark Markham had been brought down by a vindictive, gold-digging wife. Some people probably even believed it. I didn't care. I had the truth, and I had the money. About 6 months after the divorce was final, Mark showed up at my door. I was living in a new apartment by then, a bright, airy place that was all mine. He looked terrible. He had lost weight, his expensive suit was rumpled, and his eyes were hollow. He tried to apologize. He stumbled through a pathetic speech about how he'd been under pressure, how he'd made mistakes, how he'd lost his way. He appealed to our 15 years of history. He even tried to cry. It was another performance, a last desperate attempt to manipulate me. I listened to the whole thing without saying a word, standing in my open doorway. When he was finally finished, his pathetic monologue hanging in the air between us, I just looked at him. "Are you done?" I asked. He nodded, a flicker of hope in his eyes. "Goodbye, Mark," I said, and I gently closed the door in his face. I didn't slam it. There was no anger left, just a profound and satisfying finality. I heard him stand there for a moment, and then his footsteps faded away down the hall. I never saw or heard from him again. And that brings me back to here, to my porch, by the lake, the life I built from the ashes of the one he tried to burn down. It's a quieter life, but it's an honest one. It is wholly and completely mine. I used the settlement money wisely. I bought this small house, invested a good portion of it, and set up a trust for my children. I went back to school and got a certification as a financial planner, specializing in helping women navigate difficult divorces. It turns out I have a gift for it, a passion for it. Last year, I joined a pottery class at the local community center. I wanted to do something with my hands, something real and tangible. That's where I met Michael. He's an architect, a kind, quiet man with warm eyes and a gentle smile. He designs beautiful, functional spaces, not ostentatious monuments to ego like Mark did. He's bringing me a cup of tea now, walking out onto the porch. He doesn't say anything, just sets the mug down beside me and puts his hand on my shoulder for a moment before going back inside. It's a simple gesture, but it's filled with more genuine care than Mark showed me in our last 5 years of marriage. He doesn't try to fill my silences. He respects them. He respects me. He knows my story, and he thinks I'm the strongest person he's ever met. Sometimes I look at the framed invoice on my study wall. It's a reminder of the price of freedom, but it's also a reminder of my own strength. At the beginning of that long, dark year, my grandmother told me something I've never forgotten. "The greatest power you have, Sarah," she said, "is the power they don't think you possess. Never let them see your strength until the moment you use it to bring them to their knees." They never saw me coming. They were so blinded by their own arrogance, so convinced of my weakness that they walked right into the trap I set for them. They wrote the script of their own downfall, and I just pressed record. And now, in the quiet of my new life, I am finally, completely at peace. The only sound is the gentle lapping of the lake against the shore, and it is the sweetest sound in the world. It is the sound of victory.